you have to remember that people want to read your stories. You have a beautiful light in you as a creator, and it is your duty to get that light into the world. And just putting your book up on Amazon is not getting your light into the world. That's not enough. You have to actually get that book in front of people and show them how that book can help them feel better about themselves or change their life or make them think. That's sort of your obligation as an artist. It's essentially, to me, putting your book on Amazon and doing nothing is like painting this beautiful like Mona Lisa and putting it in your closet.
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, onto the show with your host, ALAB Barnard.
Hello, everybody. Hello, bosses. We are here today with the amazing KT Strange, who has given me permission to just call her Kit. She is. But if you want to find her, you got to look for KT Strange. But she is a reverse harem romance author from the Great White North. After spending 10 years in the music scene, babysitting drunk rock stars, she's finally ready to settle down, kinda, and write a few good books inspired by her life on the road with bands. And I have read 2 of her books. I don't even know how many she has out, but I've read 2 of them and really enjoyed them. And it is fun to see. I'm like, she's actually done this. And actually, to be honest, you guys, when I was reading through some of her stuff, I was like, oh man, this sounds so familiar. I remember some books that I read that are kind of like this. And then I realized that they were her books that I had read that were like this. I'm like, oh yeah, her books. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's like absolutely an honor. And I love what you do on your social media and you're so inspiring to people. So I'm just so pleased. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So this is very exciting because we are going to find out a little bit about you. If you could share your author journey, where you started and how you got to where you are now, that'd be really awesome.
Sounds super rad to me. So I have 3 books out right now. They're all in the, it's called the Rogue Witch series. It's about like a witch who's a music band manager and she's got a band full of werewolves and there's some politics in there. It's a good time. And it's basically me combining my love of like werewolves with my love of working in the music industry or my hate of working in the music industry, whatever you want to call that. But that is the culmination of probably 10 years working in the industry. And then before that, I wrote in high school in the creative writing program that we had. Actually won a scholarship off some of my writings. That was pretty cool. But then I didn't write for a decade. I mean, and this is so common. Like people will be like, hey, I wrote in high school and then I just stopped writing because I was an adult and all the writing I did was papers for college or whatever. But for me, I jumped right into the workforce and didn't do much of stuff. And then a couple years ago, I had a friend who she had written, I guess, like a horror novel and self-published it on Amazon. And she said to me, why don't you write a book? And I was like, what? Like this concept had not ever sort of occurred to me because I'd written like fanfic. Like I was like, I like the Final Fantasy games. Like I'll write a little story about that. And that's kind of had been all that I'd done up until that point. And I had just gotten like pretty sick and I'd been sort of like bedridden for 6 months and not doing much. So I was like, I'll just write. And I started writing and publishing my work basically from bed. And it didn't do very good because nobody wants to read superhero romance, apparently. But I learned from my mistakes and started writing historical romance, stuff like that. I did that for about a year. And I was able to quit my job that I was working at the time and go full-time writer pretty much within 6 months of publishing my first piece, which was really cool. And I know it was not the case for everyone. I think I just hit like a niche and I learned it pretty well. I learned how to market it. And then a couple months ago in January, I started writing reverse harem because I've been a long time anime fan. And one of the things I've done in sort of my decade in the entertainment industry was one of my artists would go and play at anime conventions. He was a musician and he'd go perform there. And I met all the voice actors, and I'd been like an anime fan as like a kid. And then I was like meeting like my heroes. I'm like, oh my God, like I totally listened to your voice when I was a child. And reverse harem is a really common theme in anime. So what it typically is, it's one girl and she has multiple male love interests. They tend not to be like crazy jealous of one another. And then at the end of the story, they all end up together in this sort of big polyamorous, happy relationship. So I started writing that in January because I'd always wanted to write a story like that. And then it did better than I ever expected in March when it released. It did crazy well. So yeah, and here I am.
Oh my gosh. Okay, quick question. And you don't have to get specifics, but what's the difference between, and you can just give like percentages or something, between being able to quit your job after 6 months with the first thing, and then crazy well.
Okay. So I live in Vancouver, BC, which is one of the most expensive real estate and rental markets in the world. I'm planning to move to LA, and people are like, it's expensive there. I'm like, actually, it's cheaper for me. So like, let's just put that in perspective.
Yes.
When I was writing historical romance, I was able to pay rent, buy groceries, put gas in my car, and like live an acceptable life. Like, you know, go out to the movies once in a while. Like I'm kind of a homebody, like nothing too exciting. When I did Crazy Well, I was like, I can pay rent for 8 months on this.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. It was one of those like, oh my God, what just happened? It won't happen again. It's a fluke. Was my immediate thought. I'm like, all right, I Carly Rae Jepsen'd the crap out of that. Had a hit. Awesome. Not happening again.
And that was the first book.
That was and then the second book came out and it happened again. I was like, oh my God, what is this? And yeah, I got a little bit nervous, but what had happened to me a year before is I had a pretty good hit for me. Like I'd say about like half, like, you know, a couple months rents all at once from a single book. And I totally had success paralysis and I stopped writing for like 3-4 months. So this time when I had a lot of success, I was like, I'm not doing that. I've made this mistake. Nope. Kit, sit your butt down in the chair and get writing and do stuff. So that was a different mindset that has helped me succeed. And I just released my third book yesterday. Well, like at midnight today.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Which is why I haven't yet read it. I'm like, I've been paying attention because I knew we had this interview. So you guys, it won't be by the time you listen to this, it will have been out. But I haven't read it because I've been waiting for it. And because I knew we had this interview, and I'm like, I want to be as up to date on her books as I can, and I haven't. I didn't, you know.
Don't. Oh, I'm not bad.
Plus, I wanted to know. Plus, I wanted to know things. Like I'm like, there are things I need to know about this book. I really enjoy your stories, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, and Amazon sent out the wrong file, so that was exciting. But they only sent out the wrong file to people in Europe and England. So everyone in New Zealand, Australia, and North America got the right file.
Okay.
So thanks, Amazon.
Thanks,
I already
Amazon.
got a 1 star because of you. Jerks.
Oh, no.
Person's like, I don't understand. File's weird. I'm like, yeah. That's because it says at the beginning, this is a dummy file. If you get this, contact Amazon.
Oh, too bad. It'll all work out. It will all work out.
I don't stress the 1 stars. You can't make everybody happy.
No.
Yeah.
Questions then. So you said, I really want to ask about this success paralysis. Is that what you said?
Yes. Success paralysis.
Yeah. Can you go into that a little bit? What and then what you've done since then, because you told us a little bit, but what does that actually look like?
So success paralysis is when you do really like the result does not match the effort. Like it is an outsized result. So like you know, it's you go to the gym every day and all of a sudden you're dropping like 10 pounds a week, which is actually really bad for you. Don't do that because you'll toast your gallbladder. Ask me how I know. So and like you're working hard, but you lose all this weight and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to eat a bunch of cake.
Mm-hmm.
But in the book world, what that looks like is you get a book that makes a lot of money really quickly, or it hits high in the ranks, or you're getting like crazy reviews all over the place, and you don't know how to follow it up. And you're like, if I write the next book, it's not going to be as good. I can never top this. I am Jennifer Lawrence. I have peaked in my career. Like it's one of those things that like hits in, and you have to work through that and say, no, like it's okay. Even if the next project isn't as good as this or doesn't get the same result, that's okay. All I have to do is keep moving. That's it. So
that's what you did in the second time when you had crazy success and you're like, nope.
And I had only given myself, I think, like less than 4 weeks to write my next book and get it edited and betaed and all that stuff. And my books aren't like 40K. They're like, I try and make them 80K. Although I'm noticing within the 4 week period, that's a little bit difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working on that. I'm trying to figure out what the best production schedule is for me in order to follow, because I have a pretty, like, when you work in management for so long with flighty artists who don't know what they're doing and are like and they don't really know how to like make their life work, you learn how to get really organized even if you never were organized before. So I've gotten super, like, I know my process. I'm like, I write it, my betas get it, my editor gets it, everything gets it, I format it, it goes out. This is a social media I do, and I have like a mental map of everything that happens. And so I'm trying to compress that and get that nice and tight. And yeah, that sounds kind of pornographic.
Nice and tight.
Yeah, that's a little dirty. I apologize.
You do not have to apologize for that on this show. Okay, so yeah, because I interviewed, there's a romance writer, Debbie Herbert, who was so lovely. And when she's like 60 years old, she does not look 60 years old, but she's a little bit older. I don't know exactly how old she is, but I made a mushrooming joke. And I was like, but I'm like, you write romance. This has to be okay. I'm like, sorry. Okay. So you were talking about, what I want to know is what your writing process is then.
Okay.
Or process.
So, but I mean, I have like a sort of a whole, because I'm doing a series and I've never done a series before that was quite so long. Like I've done series before where it's like a novel that's kind of broken up into like 20K chunks, so to speak. But this is like a full book, and then it's going to be 5 or 8 books. Like it's and it follows a story arc, and there's side characters that are going to get their own shoot off series. So I've had to sort of up my like plotting game, like, because, you know, we're all not like perfect. Like I am definitely not a perfect writer. And when I started writing 2 years ago, I've been working with the same editor for 2 years. She was like, Kit, you really suck at subplots. You need to get better at that. So that's something where I really tried to bring my A game with this series. So I've had to plan out the entire arc. I know where I'm going with it. I know what's happening, which has allowed me to put in like little like Easter eggs along the way, which I get excited about. And I'm like, I don't care if nobody knows. This is awesome. But the process I usually go is I sit down. I'm like, okay, where does my character need to be at the end of the book? What situation am I leaving her in to get people excited for the next book so that they pre-order and I can like be like, yeah, I'm going to be able to make rent that month. So that's sort of like where I think about. And then I plot the first half of the book. And then by the time I get to the midway of actually writing it, the characters have done whatever the F they want to do. And things have changed a little bit. And then the last half kind of plots itself. And then I end up where I'm supposed to be. So that's the writing process.
I like it.
Sounds really stupid when I say it out loud. But hey, it's, you know what? It's worked well for me.
Hey, I don't think that there's any one writing process that is the one that everybody should do and that's what works. I think if it works for you and you find what works for you, do it.
Yeah. That's sort of like where I'm at. Like, I've worked with artists for so long as a manager that now being an artist, I'm able to sort of counsel myself. I'm like, chill out, relax, just do the work. If it's not perfect, that's fine. And every time you put out a new book, you learn a little bit more and you tweak your process and you get a little bit better. Like I've put out over 60 pieces of fiction in the last 2 years, which like it's more than 1,000,000 words. I've written a lot of stuff. And by doing that process over and over again, I've gotten really good at knowing what I'm really bad at. And then I'm like, okay, got to work on this, got to be stronger, got to make sure that my side characters are good, that my banter is good, because I write like kind of like, I don't want to invoke his name because he's kind of a jerk now, but like Joss Whedon was always really good at writing story arcs that had lots of people. He was good at the ensemble cast, and I want to be really good at that. So it's all about knowing where you're bad and like just working that writing muscle. Like, okay, I'm bad at subplots. I have to make sure that I put in a little bit of this subplot over 3 or 5 chapters over the course of the book to resolve in this book or resolve in the next book. And it seems kind of like cold and mechanical, but I know what ends up happening is my readers have a good time. And that's all that really, in the end, that's all I really care about. Are they enjoying themselves?
I'm taking notes. I'm like, ooh, yeah. There was a question that you sparked a question in there, and it was something about 60 books in 2 years. So
well, I mean, they're not all full books.
Yeah, 60 pieces of fiction. I wanted to ask, because a lot of people are trying to make their first or second or their first books like the best books.
Yes. Yeah.
And what has your experience been? Because obviously you're doing something else. Because they can't be perfect if you're doing 60 pieces in 2 years.
Yeah. And I would just like to address the person who's listening to this and sweating bullets and being like, if this isn't perfect, it's okay. It's going to be okay. And if you have a project that is so dear to your heart and you haven't yet published, don't write that project now. Wait, save that project. You are going to get so much better in 2 or 3 published items time that you are going to be a different writer. So it's okay to put out something that isn't that like beautiful piece of art that's been hiding in the back of your brain. Wait until you have all the pieces together. It's a little bit like in music when someone comes to me and they're like, I wrote this song and it's the most beautiful piece I've ever written, but I recorded it at home in my garage with like my cousin Billy Bob on like the freaking accordion, and the quality is crap, and I can't have it produced by anyone good, and I can't have it mastered, and I can't afford to have it pressed onto albums or any of that stuff. It's like, wait, because you get so much better. And by waiting, like this project with my reverse harem thing, I'd been wanting to write this story for a damn long time. And I waited and waited and waited and waited. And your first book is your worst book, but your next book is your best book that you put out by far. So keep putting out projects until you're like, you can afford a professional editor, because that is important to have. They make you so much better as a writer. And if you create a relationship with one, they can help you grow. And they act as almost kind of like a writing coach. They can identify what areas as an author you're weak, and you can get really strong at that, so that when you write that project that just like makes your heart light up, it is the best that you could possibly do. So it's okay to put something on the back burner. It's absolutely okay with that. And like, just do it. Write a couple of projects. Be like, I have this like lighthearted idea for a short novella about a guy who, table for one, and he likes photography and he eats by himself every night. And then there's a murder mystery or whatever. Write something that's like not quite what you're totally in love with, and learn how to push yourself through a book that isn't the project of your heart, if that makes sense. At least that's my best advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make sense. It makes really, really good sense. So I'm an entrepreneur at heart, but it took me a long time. And I kept wanting to start things that I didn't care about that much. And for me, it was like the opposite, because they weren't very successful, because entrepreneur is you have to jump all in.
Oh yeah. Yes, you do.
Like you have to jump all in. But writing is different, because you get better as the more that you do. And so
you get more skilled, you get more knowledgeable. Yeah. You know what to do. Like I knew what to do when Amazon sent the wrong file out to half the world. Like, I didn't panic. I was like, all right, I know what I got to do. I got to log in at 5 p.m. PST, upload the right file to Amazon because they didn't save the improper file. And that will make sure that file is pushed out to everybody in North America. So at least I only sent the wrong thing to half the world as opposed to the whole world. Like I knew what to do because I'd been through this process, and I'm checking my book report 65 times. So I'd been through this process 65 times previously. And you just learn those little tweaks of like, okay, who do I go to get my book formatted the way I want it formatted? You make all the mistakes. And with writing, you just get so much better each time you put out a product, going through that motion, learning how to plot, learning how to push yourself through to the end of a book, because it's a marathon. Like, it is hard freaking work to finish a book. Like, I may have done this a bunch of times, but it's still just as hard every time you do it. But it gets a little bit easier because you're like, I know this feeling. I know the feeling of like the soggy middle where I'm like, this sucks. The book sucks. Everything sucks. Like, I know what I have to do now. I go to my beta readers. I'm like, hey, read this and give me good feedback. I don't want to hear any bad feedback. Just don't tell me that stuff because I need to pick me up. So you learn yourself and how to like kind of like manipulate your own mind to finish the project and do it to the best of your ability. So if there's something like you're sweating it out, put out like a really short novella on a toss away pen name and just learn that process of publishing. Because yeah, I mean, you're doing yourself every favor by doing that.
I love that so much. I love how you said manipulate your mind, because that is like my my unspoken motto of like, there's going to be a lot of stuff that I don't want to do, so I trick myself into doing it.
It's so true, right?
By like not admitting to myself that that's what I'm actually doing. You know?
Well, our brains are trying to keep us safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, out there are saber-toothed tigers and bears and stuff. So stay in your hut, stay in your cave, like don't go out. And so we sabotage ourselves like so frequently, and we get worried about stuff and we get all tense and things. So you have to do things to like, you know, make yourself do the things that seem scary and terrible and weird. And I do that by eating a lot of chocolate.
I do that by drinking a lot of wine.
Oh my gosh,
and chocolate. And chocolate. Chocolate's there too. And maybe a bath.
I mean, I wasn't much of a drinker before I hit the music industry. And while I was in it, like full time working in it, you just don't drink when you're on the road, like managing artists, like, cause you can't, like, you've got to be like with it so that they can get drunk. But so chocolate is kind of my vice. And the local chocolate store girl like knows me. She's like, oh, here for your usual. I'm like, oh crap. Like, this is bad.
Oh man. Okay. So how is your writing like actually happening? Like, are you standing, like, are you dictating, or what are you actually doing to do this writing?
Okay, when I dictate, I ramble. So like, and I'll say the same thing over and over. So when I've dictated passages, my editor's like, I can see like the flat face, like pressed lips in a straight line that she's like sending me like over text. She's like, what is this? Like, does not make any sense. I'm like, shit. Like, so it's I type. I find the word flows better a lot when I type, which I know is going to be hell on my wrist someday. So I try and be gentle and have good posture. I have a little MacBook Air that goes everywhere with me. I've written all over the place. I do a lot of train travel because I had a really bad flight to Japan, and because I'm an old person now, as in not 18 anymore. I figure I'm an adult. I can not do stuff I don't like, and I don't like to fly. So I do a lot of train travel, and I write a lot on the train. I have a privacy screen so that like little Susie, 8-year-old running up to me, doesn't look over my shoulder and see things about penises, because that's not acceptable for her to have that rude awakening so early in life. And
5 penises.
Well, 5 penises. That's a lot of dick, okay? Like, even me, I'm like, this is great in fantasy. Reality, I would just be like,
oh my
please
gosh,
go away.
Fantasy,
I'd be like,
for sure.
Go away. Like, don't touch me. Like, go make yourself some pizza. Like, that would be like,
I know, I think about reverse harem and I'm like, the fantasy is wonderful. The reality of 5 guys and a girl in a van would be like so much fart.
I got stories, y'all.
Like, I'm like, I had no idea. I grew up with mostly women, and And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I had no idea how much guys actually fart.
It's amazing. They don't feel the need to hold it in. Like women, you'll hold it in forever. Like your brain is exploding, but you don't want to put people through that. So, but men, they're like, it's my body. I'm like, that's nice. That's gross. Like,
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I have tour stories. I do, but we won't get into that because it just doesn't matter to this.
It doesn't matter to this, but now everybody's going to want to know. They're like,
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
What stories?
Yeah, well, guess what? You got to read my book.
Secretly, yeah, put them in a book.
Womp, womp.
Put them in
a lot of the experiences my character goes through, like road stuff, is stuff that I've actually gone through. So, like things that have happened, or things like she's got this music. The label, sort of assistant manager of the label that she works at, gives her this talk about bitches and broads, and like word for word, that conversation was given to me by this very amazing woman in the music industry who's super high up and like so smart. And she said, "Kit, in this industry, there's bitches and there's broads, and bitches stab you in the back and broads help you up." And she was like, "Who do you want to be? Just so you know, like you need to make that decision for yourself, because you can stab people in the back and get where you need to go, or you can help other people up and get where you need to go." So, anyways, a little bit of wisdom.
I think that's good wisdom for a lot of industries, like even including this one that, writing. Yeah, absolutely.
Boy,
with
is it
authors.
ever.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And we're not going to get into any of the whatever's happening now.
Oh,
that will hopefully have passed over by the time this comes out. So, what? That's really good. What have you done? You mentioned like a while back. What have you been doing for your marketing?
So, my main gig in music was I was a social media marketer before that title existed. So I started out in like 2008 doing online marketing with like MySpace and LiveJournal and stuff like that. And when Twitter really exploded, which was in 2009, because there was remember that hostage taking? I think it was in an India hotel in 2009. And people were live tweeting from the event. And that was like the first time that news had really been broadcast on Twitter, like from like this is happening right now. Here we are. Here's photos. This is what's going on inside the hotel. Like that was the first time that Twitter had really been seen. Oh, this is more than just like some nerds on the internet. This is actually a tool for news dissemination. So I rode this wave of being like this super nerdy kid who'd been on the internet forever and ever, and people didn't understand Twitter, and they didn't understand Facebook, and they didn't understand marketing online at all. And I knew what it was. It was just telling stories in a different format and being engaging by telling people things like that were interesting for them to hear. So I went from like intern with a weird producer dude to walking red carpets within about 11 months of working in the industry. And my artist was like nominated for like Artist of the Year in her category. And I was being asked to speak at colleges and universities. And they're like, "What book can we get our students to read about Twitter?" I'm like, none, because at the time there was nothing. Like there was, so I basically like was a really early social media like strategist before that existed. And so I've kind of lived and breathed social media for a decade now. Like that's all I've done. That sounds really shallow and terrible. I've also helped out at soup kitchens, so I'm not like totally one dimensional. But so I've lived and breathed social media, and with me and how I like to do my social media is a very real, very authentic. My readers know who I am, and they understand what I stand for, and they know the kind of person I am, and that comes across in my social media. So everything I do is just like honest. I'm like, honesty box, guys. I feel like shit today. What's going on in your life? I bet it's probably crappy too. Let's bitch. Like stuff like that. And I built my sort of social media following, which in my opinion, they're pretty excited and like loyal and very active. Like it's something that you've done good when other authors are like, "Girl, how did you do that?" Like, when they come to you, they're like, "God, your fans are crazy. That's awesome." I'm like, "Yeah, it's because I treat them like they're people." Like that's sort of like I treat them like they're my friends. That's sort of how I have an attitude of, and that's that's basic guerrilla music marketing. Like when you've got a young band playing a show on the road, their job after the end of their show and they're done with their set is to get off stage and make buddies with everybody in the room. Like you have to do that because otherwise they're all going to forget about you. And when you come back through 6 months' time, they're not going to come out to your show. So I have that mentality of I need to be nice to everybody, make friends with everybody. And naturally, I'm an extrovert. I love people. So it kind of goes hand in hand for me. But that's how I've built my social media presence, in that it's very real, very authentic, very much like I respond to everything as soon as I can, that sort of thing. Even when like my life has been an exploding like valley of carpet bombs, like I've still tried to get on my Facebook and stuff like that. I participated in the community of the genre that I was writing in. So I was very active on the Facebook groups that talk about reverse harem. I made sure I read other authors. I promote other authors. I responded to when fans were like, I really like it when this is in a book. I'm like, yeah, I really like that too. This is my favorite thing that happened. So I participated in conversations, and I didn't hold myself above and I didn't hold myself back. So like frequently authors and artists will think like I have nothing to say, nobody wants to hear from me. But reality is that if you care about other people, they do want to hear from you, because we're all looking for someone to listen to us in a way. So if you reach out and say, yeah, I totally see what you meant about this book. I didn't like that either. But I try not to do that. I try never to diss other authors or their books. Like I think that's bad practice. Mm-hmm. But I think it's very bad practice. But if you kill an animal in your book, I will probably say that I didn't like that. I get a little upset.
So forewarning, you guys.
Forewarning.
Don't send me your books if you're gonna kill an animal in them.
No. I mean, it's fine if they're like, we're slaughtering goats this season. Okay, Little House on the Prairie, I got this. But like if it's like someone's beloved pet cat and suddenly that cat dies in a horrific way, I'm gonna be a little shell-shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically how I did social media, is talking about stuff like that. And I think that's a really organic way to go about it. And I've gone from very little social media. Nobody knew who I was end of January to I have almost 400 people in my group now. I mean, I don't stress so much about numbers. Like I think it's really important not to like sweat that. Like if you only have 10 people in your fan group, awesome. Love the hell out of those 10 people. Just shower them with affection and fun stuff and make their life brighter, because you want to make a deep connection. Like you don't want to be a Twitter account that has like 30,000 people and then you tweet and you get like one like, like that is not a good look.
Yeah. Yeah. Having a small amount of quality people, or who like people who really love everything you do, versus like you see in different writing groups where they're like, okay, post your Facebook page and everybody likes them. And you're like, oh, look how many likes I have on my Facebook page. And I'm like, I'd rather you have, 50 likes of people who really, really liked it than, 5,000 of just other authors who are never going to go to your page again because they don't read your stuff.
Yeah. No, I never post my stuff on there because, to be frank, those are not my customers. Like the guy who's writing memoirs about the 1940s is not going to read my reverse harem, and bless his little soul, but he's not going to. Yeah. So like, I don't want him in my Facebook group. Get out. And like, I do actually like when people, cause it's not an open group where anyone can just add themselves. Like they add and I have to approve it. And I have turned people down because I'm like, I see who you are. You are not my customer and you're some creepy man dude. And I have a lot of ladies in here who need a break from man dudes because their whole day is like taking care of their husband. So I was like, no, sir, get out.
Sorry, but not sorry. Because you're being very purposeful about the community that you create. And it's not just everybody gets in. No. The more people, the better.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No, be selective.
Yeah, be selective. Right? I like it. Because once you know who your customer is.
Yeah. Once you know who your customer is, because it may surprise you. Like who's actually listening to your stuff. Like you have to kind of be aware, like, who is my customer? What do they eat for breakfast? Like, know all those marketing things, and then you can do a better job of creating a community they want to participate in. And that's so important because the algorithms on Facebook, on Twitter, on like every other website, because everyone's using algorithms now to like curate content. They're going to show your stuff to a limited portion of the people that you are in your group. And if you have 50,000 people and maybe only a small portion of that, even a quarter of them actually like your stuff, you run the risk of your stuff only being seen by people who really don't give a crap about you. And why would you do that to yourself? No, you want every fan who's in your group who likes your page to actually like your stuff.
Yeah.
Numbers don't matter. They really don't.
Oh my gosh. I think that's so important for people to hear.
Yeah.
And I want to know, because when you were talking about you've been living social media for the last 10 years and then feeling bad about it. And I'm like, I don't feel bad about it, because I think a lot of people, like if you were to say, I've been writing for the last 10 years, everybody would be like, oh, that's so cool. But part of being an author, like it's like half and half, or some amount of like half writing and half marketing and selling, because without
totally
like it's like both, and that's what the challenge that so many people have, is because they didn't grow up being like, I want to market my books.
I know, and they're like, I hate marketing. I mean, honestly, like it's not like this is unusual to anything like except writing. Like I've worked in music. Most artists are like, I don't understand Twitter. Like, I don't want to tell people what I ate for breakfast. I'm like, well, you're gonna. It's like, so there's been a lot of that in my life. And I think I've really benefited from coming from a marketing background and building up organic followings and stuff like that, and doing some like crazy things that landed my artists on like front pages of newspapers. And like, I felt like the whole time, like I didn't know really what I was doing, but nobody told me that I couldn't do it, so I just did it. Or they would tell me, you can't do that. So I was like, screw you, watch me. Like, I'm going to. Like, that's happening. So, it's hard for artists to sort of put on that marketing hat. And you have to remember that people want to read your stories. You have a beautiful light in you as a creator, and it is your duty to get that light into the world. And just putting your book up on Amazon is not getting your light into the world. That's not enough. You have to actually get that book in front of people and show them how that book can help them feel better about themselves, or change their life, or make them think. That's sort of your obligation as an artist. It's essentially, to me, putting your book on Amazon and doing nothing is like painting this beautiful like Mona Lisa and putting it in your closet. No one's going to see it. It's not going to change the world. So
yeah. And starting marketing is hard. But when you're first starting and you don't know anybody and you're like, it can be hard. Well, there's ways to make it easier, but the mindset is what's hard when you're beginning. But once you get going and you have fans and people who love your stuff, is it easier?
The fire feeds itself. Like, it's like your buddy Steve invites you to a party, and you kind of don't know Steve that well. Like you met him at like a disc golf tournament or something once, and he invites you to a party of a bunch of people you don't know. Like, and you're like, oh, this is gonna suck, and you go, and it's awkward at first, but then you meet someone, and they're kind of cool, and you start talking, and then other people gravitate towards the conversation because you are an artist and you are fun and interesting, and people get very excited by being around artists. So they all gravitate towards you, and all of a sudden you're the life of the party and you're not even drunk yet. Like stuff's exciting. So that's sort of what I try, and like with my social media clients, I would try and get them into that mindset. And with an author, if you're nervous about that, you just have to talk to one person. Just start one conversation. Do that 5 times. See where you're at,
Yeah. And I think a really great way, this is what I tell people. So we both are kind of in the similar space, but I'm like, if you're an introvert, just ask questions.
So true.
Ask questions. What's your favorite? Who's your favorite such and such? Who's your favorite superhero? What's your favorite, fantasy animal? Who, if you ask questions, who would be in your harem? people
Oh my God.
love to respond. And then the conversation's already started and all you have to do is reply, which is so much easier than trying to come up with some kind of content on your own.
Totally. Like, people love to talk about themselves. Like, we all know this because we all love to talk about ourselves. Like, I have rarely, like, sometimes someone's like, I don't like to talk about myself. And then they proceed to tell me their life story. So I'm like, ah, ha, 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 caught you, Brandon. Like, you know, I know what you're all about. What's up? So, I mean, I read the book a while ago, How to Make Friends and Influence People. And it's like an old book and everyone's heard of it. But few people, like, they're like, oh, I actually read that. Like, people are like, I mean to read that. Read it. It's such a good book. And if you approach your marketing and social media like that, like, all you're supposed to do is ask people about themselves and what they're interested in, and have it be questions that do relate back to your book, but don't be pushy about it. Don't be like, well, in my book, this happens. Like, shut up. Don't do that. Like, wait until you've built some social currency first. Put some money in that friendship bank before you start doing that.
Yeah. And I want to point out for people, because you're obviously, Kit, you're such an expert in this because you've been doing it for 10 years. So if you don't have like your own people yet, she said she goes into the places where her readers hang out. So she's participating in the Facebook groups where her audience is. So if you're writing, you know, young adult fantasy, go find the young adult fantasy Facebook groups and hang out in there.
Yeah, no, totally true. Like, I could come up with lots of examples about food right now. So we're not going to do that because that's a dumb segue. But I started out in reverse harem in mid-January. Nobody knew who I was. I did not use my old mailing list. I did not have a huge list of contacts. I did not have a fan group. I had nothing. Nobody knew who I was, and I started from scratch. And all I started doing was commenting on other people's stuff, and that was it. And I was just nice, and I was friendly, and I was open. And here I am a couple months later, like, it's May. Oh my God, May. We're almost to Christmas.
I know.
It's May, and I've made more money in the last 2 months than I made all of last year.
Wow.
Which for me, like, I sit here and I'm like, oh my God. And it feels like a little churlish and like bizarre. I'm like, I'm making friends and they're giving me money. Like, that feels a little weird, but I'm trying to put that aside, be like, no, you need this money, you deserve it, you've written a good book, stop sweating it, write the next book, stop that. Because that's like a trap you can get into as well, especially if you make really good friends with a lot of the people who are reading your book. You're like, oh, everyone deserves everything for free, and you stop valuing yourself as an artist. And it's like, no, they're paying less for my book than they do for like a special cup of coffee at Starbucks. You can buy my book. It's good. So
yeah. And I think in that kind of thing, that's I'm like a natural coach, so here goes. Have you ever given somebody a gift, like you found the exact perfect gift that you wanted to give somebody, and then and you're like, oh my gosh, and you're waiting for like weeks for them to finally open it, and then they open it and they're like, oh, thank you, and you can tell like they're moved, but they don't say they're like they don't. You don't get the response.
Yeah,
I feel like writing your book and then giving it away for free doesn't allow the people to the money is their response. Like the $3 or whatever it is, the $2.99 or $3.99 is their ability to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Button. Click that button.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not valuing the gift.
No, and it still worked. Just because you like doing it doesn't mean it's not hard.
Yeah.
Like, it always like chaps my ass when we'll drive halfway across a continent, which is a long way to play a show, and some punk ass kid like sidles up to me at the merch booth, is like, "Can I get a shirt for free?" And I'm like, "Would you go away?" Like, no, like, I'm not giving you a free shirt. Do you know how many rest stops I had to stop at that were gross to get here? Like, it is, and writing is the same process. Like, there's some gross rest stops on the way to finishing your book. Like,
yeah, it's okay I think that's especially hard for women, more so than men. But Do you read in your genre?
I do and I don't.
Okay.
So I read enough to know what's poppin', so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But I also try not to read other authors in my genre because I don't want to inadvertently copy anybody. That's not cool. And I have like my own stories to tell. I know what tropes to hit. I'm good. And I also, the main thing I do actually is I read reviews. So I read the reviews, the 1-star reviews, the 2-star reviews, and then the 5-star reviews. I look for what the readers are saying. I love this or I hate this. And I'm like, good stuff, good to know, because there's themes in that, and like you can see like they hate it when XYZ happens, so I'm like, okay, make sure that doesn't happen in my book. Like, so, and the only exception there is cliffhangers. Everyone's like, I hate cliffhangers. I'm like, yeah, but you buy the next book, so I think you're lying. Somebody is not telling the truth. Santa knows. So yeah, I don't listen to them about cliffhangers, but everything else I listen. And I think that can be a very good tool for figuring out what in the trope or niche that you're writing in, what is it that people are looking for, like that emotional payoff that they get from that book, like what reward they're looking to receive from that book. Did the book they are reviewing, did it hit it? Did it not hit it? Why did it not hit it? Okay, good. Make sure that does or does not happen in my book. So yes, but no.
Yeah, which is it's really good information. And I want to ask, because you told us that you've been wanting to write. This has like been in this one is your baby that you've been dreaming about for a long time. And so I'm wondering, how does what you just told us about figuring out what people love and I've been wanting to write this for a long time, how do those mesh?
I'm a people pleaser, like most women. So I just like to make people happy. And so essentially, like what I did is I had beta readers on my book. So I would write sort of the story that I wanted, but made sure to include things that I knew my readers would want. And then I started sending them chapters. And when they would write me back, like squealing, like in all caps, like, this is the best thing in the world, I was like, it made it so much easier to, like, what I wanted slowly became what they wanted, if that makes sense. And I was just happy delivering them something that just made their day. Okay. And maybe that is not the process for everybody. Like, your mileage may vary, but it worked for me. Like, emotionally, like what I wanted to write and what they wanted to read kind of ended up merging.
Okay. How did you find these beta readers?
I advertised on the groups I'd been participating in. I was like, yo, what's up? I'm writing a book. Any takers? And I had my blurb written. So I was like, go read the blurb. Just so you know, there's some dirty stuff in the book. So you got to be 18. And you got to be okay with explicit sex scenes, because that's happening. And I had about, I'd say 10 or 15 people immediately within like a day or two. And those people, I formed a Facebook group. They had to join the Facebook group. And that became the seed of what is now my fan group. So they were early ambassadors, and they started telling people before the book was even done, like, this book's so good. Kit's so nice. She's just like the best. And this book is amazing. And I mean, whether my book is that good or not, doesn't really matter. In their perspective, they love my book and they think I'm pretty awesome, which is like, that makes my heart glow. Like, that's so nice.
Yes.
And I had all these like super fans really quickly because I was just a decent human being and I was putting out a product that they enjoyed. So
it sounds like you didn't like wait until the very final draft to invite your beta readers.
No, they saw everything, like the hairs on everything. It was gross, but that was fine. But I'm also like, I will caveat, I'm a pretty clean writer. Like I don't do heavy revisions. I write one pass and my beta readers see it. Like usually like at 3 a.m, I'm like, this is the best. It's not the best. And I upload it. And then they're like, there's a lot of typos. I'm like, I was very tired and drinking a lot of Red Bull. Please excuse me. So I don't mind showing them kind of like the ugly process of art. And they've actually expressed to me that they like that. They like being able to see the chapter evolve, because in the final book, there's usually stuff that's changed like a little bit. Like I've added more description, or dialogue has improved or whatever, like through like little revisions that I've done along the way, like nothing crazy heavy. So if you're not comfortable with showing people, that's understandable, but also try it once or twice. Like, you don't have to do it forever if you don't like it, and see what happens. Because people get so invested when they're a part of like, they feel like they're a part of the art. They're like, we get to tell you we didn't like this. We want to see this kind of scene instead. And then I write that, and it ends up working for whatever I'm doing in the book. Like, I don't feel like I'm compromising my art by giving my readers what they want. Like, it feels good to me. I don't write stuff that I'm like, nah, that doesn't work. Like, I'm like, oh, maybe later, or maybe never. Or I might write that as like a little giveaway on my, like an alternate universe scene or whatever, as like a little thing for my group, which I'm doing right now.
A comedic deleted scene where it's all about farts in the van.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't fit in the storyline at all, but for people who you teased us with that story earlier.
So we had a young band, and it was their first tour, and they were quite frugal, and they were insistent that they were going to make money on their tour. But like, as a young band, you always go broke. Like, that's the way it is. So this lead singer, he got really excited because he's like, I'm going to eat lunch for $1 today. We were like, what? And he bought 2 taquitos for $1 at this like unnamed gas station, and everyone told him not to do it. But he did it, and then he ended up like shitting his way up the I-5 from like California to Washington, and just like, we'd stop at the gas station, and he'd like grab his ass and like run out of the car holding his ass, like scooting across like the gas station, and then we go to a different gas station because none of us wanted to use the bathroom. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, you can't do that with your characters. They're too sexy for that. But thank you for sharing the story.
Some stuff you can't. Not acceptable. Like, people would be like, kid, no.
We can't think of them that way. You're ruining the romance. Ruining
gross.
The fantasy.
Yeah, no. Diarrhea is not conducive to like epic romances.
No.
No.
Okay, so you have a lot going on. How do you stay motivated?
I need to eat. Like, that sounds like really, like, I stay motivated by remembering I've got bills to pay. I'm a big believer in being uncomfortable. Like, that sounds like so buzzword. Oh well, who cares? It's true though. Like, you can hate your job and hate your living situation, but be comfortable in it. Like, be just like, whatever, here I am. But you can also hate your job and your living situation and be uncomfortable. And that's when you actually start to make changes, when you get uncomfortable. So I tend not to think like, oh, I have 6 months rent in the bank. No, that money's already spent. I'm like, no, I'm paying off debt. I'm doing this with it. I'm investing it into business stuff. I have to earn that money again over in order to pay my rent for 6 months. So I'm making myself uncomfortable, which pushes me to write and produce. And I have to, like, I don't have a choice. Like, if I don't do this, I've got to go out and get like a real job, quote unquote. And I've been self-employed for 10 years. Like, no one's going to hire me. Like, I mean, I don't have formal education. I went right into the workforce. I think I've done a couple classes at college level, and that's it. I have my apprenticeship certificate for big rig trucks. Like, I worked as a mechanic for a little bit. But so like this, it's for me, it's like ride or die. Like, it's right or die, basically. Like, you got to do this. And that's a pretty big motivation for me. And I think if you're struggling to get motivated, then make yourself uncomfortable. I'm not saying like quit your job when you have 5 kids to feed. Bad idea. Don't do that. But like, do something and say, okay, well, I'm going to disconnect my cable. So I literally have nothing to do, and I'm not going to pay for Netflix. Mm-hmm. That's not happening. Like, make your life uncomfortable so that you're forced to do stuff. Like, our brains are so good at making us not do new, exciting things that could better our lives. So just push yourself. Like, I know one guy, he's like, if I don't work, I don't get to do anything. I have to sit there and just stare at the wall. And so I work. I'm like, that's smart. He's literally boring himself into working. Like,
I got to say, because I have something very, very similar. Because I want to create this life that I want. I want to create the life of my dreams. And my dreams, everybody has their own dreams. Mine are not like super fancy, actually. Like the life of my dreams is like enough money to travel, like,
right.
like it's not like craziness, but it's mine. And that's what I really want. And so the last couple of years, I've been practicing the being uncomfortable. And like now it's not as comfortable to just be comfortable. Do you know what I mean? Like I've been being,
I totally get it.
I've been being uncomfortable enough. Like I've been pushing my boundaries a lot in the last couple of years. And so now if I'm not, it feels weird.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. Like it's one of, like, each of us has to find that thing inside of us that motivates us. Like when I was quite a bit younger, just before I started working in the music industry, I was basically, like, we call it proto homeless, like where you're couch surfing, like you're not on the street sleeping rough, but you're essentially, like, if you didn't have the charity of friends, you would be. And not having enough money to eat and not having enough money to pay rent was a really, like, that has pushed me. Like even now, like I really hate not having food in the fridge, because I have those, like, that same, like, collecting cans to go buy $2 worth of ground chicken. Like, this sounds so sad story. It's like, I'm fine. Like, it's good. but you get into that mindset. And ever since then, I'm like, I need to be uncomfortable, because that's when I really work hard, is when I'm uncomfortable, when I'm like, I won't have enough money to pay rent. That's when I write my best pieces, because it's like passion and fear and all that pours into whatever it is I'm doing, and it comes out in what I'm doing. So,
oh my gosh.
I don't talk about that often.
That is so quotable. Not the chicken part, but you
don't like my ground chicken story? Why
not?
No,
I got to tell you, I really appreciate that you shared that, because I've been in the space of looking at entrepreneurs and authors and writers for a while, and not very many people share their stories. Like I'm looking at all these, they're like, oh, and then I quit my 6-figure job and da 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 da. And I'm like, I can't relate to that. No. I don't relate to that at all. Like my parents, were, and I love them, but like there was some, it was like, I didn't have that supportive parents. I didn't have, the money or anything, so I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you for sharing, because I think there's a lot of people listening who want to be successful, but haven't seen it. There's not that many role models of people who go from really bad situations to the life of their dreams. There's just not. So,
well, like, I'll be totally honest. Like, I grew up really affluent. Like, I grew up in the richest neighborhood in my city, which is one of the most expensive ones in the world. Like, I had trips to Europe. I had horseback riding lessons. We had 2 boats. Like, we had a lot of stuff. And then in my teens, my parents lost everything. And like, they still managed somehow to keep me in my private school so my education wouldn't be disrupted. And then as I got out of school, like, they were super supportive, and they helped me. Like, if I said, I want to go do this program, they would help me financially with it. But at the same time, they also wouldn't bail me out if I screwed up. And I appreciated that. And it got to a point where I had made some bad financial decisions. I was in a very expensive, like, rental area where, like, the cheapest apartment in the shittiest part of town was like $1,200 to $1,400 a month for like a studio. I was working full time, making well above minimum wage, and still not able to keep food on the table. Like, it was just, everything was really expensive all at once, because I was working in the oil sands area, and like the prices of everything is just like through the roof there. And everything compounded on like little old me making dumb decisions and not doing well. And I ended up living on people's couches and living this really transient life of all my stuff was in the trunk of my car. And I ended up traveling like 3 hours north to live with a band in their house, and that didn't work. They became drug addicts, so I got kicked out of there. I had to go live in a basement. These guys were like, hey, come live in our basement. Like, you can do the cleaning in our house, and you can live there rent free. Like, it was a very like bizarre, like, to go from like private schools and like 45-foot yachts to like living in essentially what are like crack houses. Like, it's a really, like, it was a big eye opener for me, and it gave me these life skills that I'd never had. And it also kind of gave me some anxieties that I'd never had. But when I ran into trouble, like I was working for my father a few years ago, and he, even though I'm taking care of him now, he was not a very good father in some ways, and he basically didn't pay me for 6 months. So my lights were getting turned off. I didn't have enough money for food. I was borrowing money from my mom, being like, hey, like he's not paying me, and like help me please. And I was doing work on the side and trying to get piecemeal work, and I ended up so stressed out from trying to keep all this stuff afloat that I was bedridden for 6 months, and I was going in and out of hospital, in and out of hospital. And they're like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're in your early 30s. You have all these like test results that are like, they're coming back like not normal, but not dangerous. Something's going on. Until one ER doctor, he said, okay, you're not dying. I have 15 minutes. Tell me what's going on in your life. And I told him, and he said, all of this stuff. And he's like, I'm not discounting how you feel because it's very real. It's happening because your life is too stressful and you need to take something off your plate because you're going to get really sick. Like, we can't help you sick. So that was like, that sort of taught me and put me in this weird place. Wow, I really rambled. I'm so sorry.
No.
But like, there's a lot of people who go through really dark times and they're working jobs they don't like, and they have partners who are not supportive of them, or they're single parents, or they're a single parent and their kid has been taken away because their ex is like awful to them and thinks that they're a terrible person now. Like, so many people who are listening to this podcast will be in that place. I have been in that place. It is awful. And my heart goes out to you. You can change your life. It's not going to be easy. And it's going to involve a lot of tears and crying on your bathroom floor at 3 a.m. Like, these things happen. But I believe that you can do it. Just keep working, and don't give up. And just, you will survive. And the art you create is that much more beautiful for the struggle you've been through, which is so terrible and also awesome at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That was really ranty.
But I think it's really beautiful because you are doing exactly what you have said, which is being authentic, being yourself. And
you gotta be yourself.
And I know, and it's just true that when you open yourself and be vulnerable with others from your heart, it's like they have to respond. Not they might respond. No. 98% of the people will respond well, and 2% will be like, too much. But yeah, but that's fine. But that's fine, because most people are going to respond really well. And when you make yourself vulnerable like that, you give other people permission to be themselves as well.
It's so true. And if someone's like listening and they're like, this crazy woman, well, this story is not for you, David. You know, like, that's sort of like, it's just like, it's okay. Yes. You don't have to connect with me. Just take what I've said about social media marketing seriously, because I do know what I'm talking about. Ignore the rest. Take what you need, leave the rest.
Amen. Okay. So the last couple of questions, and you've given a lot of amazing advice, but do you have any advice specifically that you'd give to authors who want to have the success that you're having now?
Oh man. I wrote some good stuff to you about this. And so I'll talk about this. Like, yeah. And I think this is why we ended up talking. I said something about myself being like a 10-year overnight success. Was that?
Yes, you did.
Okay. So in music, most people you see who break through all of a sudden they've been in the industry for like 10 years. So I'll take Carly Rae Jepsen as an example, because she's like from my area of the world. And she was in her late 20s when Call Me Maybe became an international huge hit. She'd been in the music industry for a long time. She wasn't like so successful that she could like, have a mansion with like a pool boy. But she was like, she didn't really have to like hustle, like work a day job super crazy. But like most artists in her position, they were like, they'd maybe work as a bartender a couple nights a week kind of thing, and then have music royalties, pay a little bit extra, but they didn't live like extravagant lives. They lived at home kind of thing with their parents. And then she wrote the song Call Me Maybe. And my best friend Nicole was working at 604 Records, which is Carly's music label. And Nicole said to me, she's like, we knew it was a hit, but we didn't know how big of a hit it would be, because that song went
Oh, yeah.
Stratospheric. Like,
Yeah.
I remember when the local radio picked it up and I listened to it. I'm like, this song is going to be huge. And then like 2 weeks later, it's like, boom, like everywhere. Carly Rae Jepsen forever. And that's because like, I'm pretty sure like her management team and Bieber's management team hooked up. So he tweeted about her because her label's owned by Chad Kroeger of Nickelback. So like, it's all kind of incestuous. But the point is that she had been in the industry hustling and working, and like she'd been on reality TV for music, and she'd been writing songs for ages, like all this stuff for like 10 years before she had this huge hit. And that's what happens is you don't see all that work that goes, it's like the underneath of the iceberg, right? Like you don't see all that work that people put in for years and years. And so you look at someone who like makes $1 million, you're like, they don't deserve that. What have they ever done? It's because you don't know that they were eating like ramen for 5 years of their life, working night shifts while trying to get this art done, and being very uncomfortable with their lives. So my advice is that know this is a long game, and winning this game is for people who learn from their mistakes and who make mistakes. And you cannot make mistakes if you're sitting on one manuscript at home, never publishing it. Like you cannot screw up and upload the wrong file or do social media mistakes or say the wrong thing or any of those things. You don't learn from yourself if you're not actually doing. So you need to do. And just writing a book, like the act of just sitting down and writing, and I'm working on my novel, is not, in my opinion, doing. Doing is the whole package. It's marketing, it's publishing, it's figuring out what editor to use, what betas to use, what proofreader to use. Like that's the actual process of doing, in my opinion. So it's really important to remember this is a long game. You can make, and I say this frequently, art for your heart, but it's not likely to pay the bills until you've been doing this for a long time. Because eventually you figure out how to mesh that like heart artwork, that like that stuff that's glowing inside of you, with what pays the bills. And that's what I ended up doing. I wrote stuff that I really didn't love all that much. I made enough to get by. I wasn't getting ahead, but I got by. I was able to quit my job and write full time. I wasn't working all that much. Like I added up all my hours for last year. I was probably working 5 hours a week, which is like, really not. That sounds so lazy. That's very lazy. Don't be like me. That's terrible. Now I work a lot more. So sometimes you got to be honest with yourself. You're like, that's dumb. See, like if I hadn't tracked all my time and been like, wow, Kit, you're not working enough, you lazy bitch. Like
you're actually doing during that time.
You're on Netflix, aren't you? You're
just imagine how much money you could have made if you'd been writing twice that.
Right. Well, now I know because I'm writing twice that and I'm making like 5 times as much. So like, yeah, it's a little bit of a wake up call. Like I think my one weakness is like people being wrong on the internet. I'm like, somebody is wrong. Like I have to correct them. So I'm working really hard. No, stop. It does not matter. You are not their mother. It's fine. Like,
there's always going to be somebody wrong on the internet.
I know my roommate, he's like, aren't you going to bed? I'm like, he's like, somebody's wrong on the internet, aren't they? I'm like, shut up. You can't hate me. So yeah, basically, right? Make art. It doesn't have to be what you're in love with. You just have to do it because the process of making art, you learn. Like the first pot that you throw is ugly as F. Like nobody wants that, not even your mother. So like you got to learn the process of how to fire up that oven and make that art beautiful. Like just the process of learning how to put out a book is more important than necessarily the book that you're writing. And that might be counterintuitive. Some people might be like, who is this woman and what does she think about anything? I have made a lot of money and so you should listen to me. Always say that. Like I'm rich.
She's made a lot of money. And I've read her book, these recent books, not all the other ones, but I've read the recent books and they are fun. They are enjoyable. Sure. And I can't wait for us to get done with this podcast so I can go freaking read the third one. Just kidding. Okay.
There's some pretty good sex scenes in the third one, I have to admit. That's some good stuff.
That's I'm like, okay, never mind.
Well, see,
never mind to everybody. I will tell you afterwards, like, how excited I am to have it be more than just the one who I can't tell any spoilers because she's going to tell us.
Right. But this is part of the social media marketing. So
yes,
my fans have a language. We call sex scenes our cake and foreplay is icing. So like they know if I put a picture up of a cake in my Facebook group, what exactly I'm writing, and they like lose their minds. They're like, cake's happening. I'm like, but who is it? You don't know. Like it's so like cultivating that sort of fandom culture. Like someone said the other day, they're like, oh, you have an actual fandom now. Like people have a culture around what you're doing. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's what you want to do with your social media.
Where they're not just your fans, but they're part of your team.
Yes,
like there's a secret language. You're all on the same team of like, we know what the calls are. We know like if it was football, you'd be like, we know what the play is. We know what the like they're part of your team. So where can people find you and tell us a little bit? Well, we've talked about the book a little bit, but go ahead and tell us about it.
Okay. So the book is about, and she's totally not me, by the way. Like it's not like a self-insert. I mean, I'm a big believer that every character you write is a little bit of you. Like it's like a facet of yourself. But she's a music manager. And she goes on tour with a band of werewolves. And she's also a witch, but she's really bad at using her powers. And so she's basically left the witching world behind. And there's some genocide that goes on. So while the band their star is rising, there's like people chasing after them, trying to murder them because they're werewolves. And so I have some politics in there because I'm Canadian and sneakily political. And I put that into my books that have a lot of sex in them because I figure, you need some iron in there with your sugar. Like, it's like a fortified cereal. Like, let's talk about genocide.
And eat Lucky Charms.
Yes.
These Lucky Charms have been fortified with calcium and B vitamins.
I have to say, I'm having so much fun talking to you. You were like so fun and engaging, and you let me talk about myself, which makes me like you even more.
Yeah.
See, so smart.
This is it.
You're so
guys,
smart.
It's working right now.
Yeah, right. Like I just love you. Like,
and so, what is your Facebook group called, or where is the best? Is that the best place for people to find you?
It's for the people listening to this podcast. My Facebook group is not for you unless you're a reverse harem fan. So don't judge me, but like I would totally understand if you said the same thing to me because I'm probably not interested in your basket weaving book or whatever it is you're writing. Mm-hmm. You can find me on Twitter at Miss KT Strange. I rant a little bit about the writing industry, a little bit about the music industry, and I also talk about pro wrestling because I really enjoy that. Which I did not like. Even though I've been basically homeless and like scrounging for food, when my roommate was like, let's watch pro wrestling, I was like, wrestling is for the poor. Like literally, I was like, what is this? And then I got into it. I'm like, this is awesome. There's stories and they're like superheroes and there's costumes and the girls are really pretty. Oh my God, I love it. And so, yeah, I really like pro wrestling now.
Oh my gosh. I'm like pro wrestling you. So but I think the only way I could get into it is if you were personally the one to introduce me.
You know what? I drive through Idaho at least 5 times a year. So I'll stop by. We'll watch some like Raw.
Oh my gosh. This sounds like so much fun.
It'll be good.
You guys are witnessing the birth of a brand new friendship right now.
Right now. But pro wrestling, is really good because their story arcs are really interesting. And you learn a lot about telling an interesting story with stuff that's like, it's 2 dudes in a ring. Like what? Like there should not be a story to this, but there is. And so I've learned actually a lot about storytelling by watching it. Like, you need to have like a degree, like a master's in order to write for them. Like you have to have experience in TV and like all this stuff to write for them. And I was like, oh my God, these people are super qualified.
I believe you 100%, but I love how you're like completely justifying that. Like I'm like I have to watch it all because it's educational, you guys.
It is super educational.
It's helping me hone my craft. Okay. Sorry. We could go, you guys, Serious. We could go on like this for a while. So I'm going to say thank you to everybody who's listening. If, please go ahead and leave some comments. Find if this is enjoyable for you and you'd like to hear more of me and Kit. Let us know.
Anytime.
And I
hope anyone listening either I pissed you off and you're inspired to go like spite write and write something you're like, I'm going to prove you wrong and write the best book ever that nobody ever wants to read, but they're going to read it. I hope that works for you. And I hope you kick ass. And if I inspired you like with like my talks about being homeless and like people shitting up the I-5, that's awesome too. I hope that helped. And I know that you've got something amazing in you to share with the world. So I cannot wait to see it. And make sure you tweet at me and be like, shitting up the I-5. I remember that moment. You said I could swear, so now I'm getting comfortable.
I did. And it's true, you can. Oh, thank you, everybody. This is me, Ella, wishing you hugs and happy authoring from Author Like a Boss.
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, onto the show with your host, Ella Barnard.